And then hopefully Claire and David are going to be here. Yes, they're on their way. And they're talking about Reiki, or Reiki. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, so I'm looking forward to learning about that. When we first was organising this event, and I was talking to my husband, he said, have you got anybody there talking about Reiki? Because there's somebody at work really into that, and I don't really know much about it. And I sort of thought, no, I don't really know much about it either. And then literally the next day, Claire was recommended to me. So I thought, well, that's just a perfect opportunity to learn about it. And hopefully they'll teach me how to pronounce it as well. So yeah, also Claire and David are probably not going to be here into the break time. So make the most of asking them any questions while they're here. Okay, and then after that, Joules is coming up, and she's talking about like hypnotherapy and reprogramming things. So I've known Joules for quite a long time, and I know she's a very interesting person. She knows lots of different things about different subjects, so I'm just happy to have her here talking about anything. Then we're going to have a break time. There's tea and coffee and refreshments. There's also like a piece of paper out there if people could write down any sort of good resources that they found along their sort of time, things that are good and interesting. Because I often find when you're looking into a new area and you don't know much about it and you might do a Google search or something, what you come up with can often be really just the sort of fine veneer of the subject and can sometimes be a bit lacklustre. And it can take a while of being interested in the subject before you find that really good book or that really good speaker about it. So today, it's about learning things, but also sharing any shortcuts that we found to really good information. So yeah, in the break time, if people could write things down there that they found that were really useful or inspiring, or really hit the nail on the head. So it could be a book that you've read, or a YouTube channel, or a podcast, or a good documentary or presentation that you've seen. And people can write that down, and then at the end, people can like, take a picture of it with their phones and look some of those things up in their own time. Okay, and then when we come back, Liz is going to be speaking about her experiences and Sasquatch and visions, and it's very, very exciting. So I've known Liz for quite a long time as well, although not as closely, because we sort of met through our kids. But I've seen her posting things about, her sort of experiences, and it's just so interesting and mind-expanding. So yeah, the opportunity to have her here actually speaking about it is really brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then Sonia's coming up, and she's talking about what is really happening and flourishing in this environment. So that's very exciting. I've spoken to Sonia a bit, and she's a very interesting person, got lots of different areas of interest, so that's really exciting. After that, there's going to be more time for people to have a talk to people, and maybe get another cup of tea and a slice of cake, and then we've got till about 3:30 before I need to start packing up and going. Okay, so that is the sort of order of the day. Oh, I should also say, obviously I'm hoping everybody is coming to today with an open mind and a sort of positive outlook. And if you feel that something's not for you, that's fine, just let it go by. And obviously everybody's speaking from their own personal opinion, so what I'm saying might not be necessarily what other people here feel and think. That's fine, we're just here to talk about things and share ideas. Right, so my spiritual journey. So my name's Lydia Smith, I live in Stevenage, and as well as being a full-time mum, I also write creatively. That's my outlet, and there's some of my books here if anybody wants to have a look at them, find out a bit more about what I do. And I am interested in my spiritual journey. I think we're all on a spiritual journey all our lives, however much people want to acknowledge that or interact with it and work with it, we are on that journey. And our society is quite sort of, material, physical oriented. It's not necessarily very accepting of the other side of things that we don't always understand. So for me, it's about these really the big questions about what is going on here. Where do we come from? Where do we go when we die? What is this life for? How should we be living? That's why Sonia's talk sounds really, really exciting. And if you look to what sort of where society tells you to look, science and things like that, I mean, they don't have answers for these things. You're not supposed to really think about them too much. Or if they do have answers, They can often be quite sort of unconvincing, uninspiring, and in the case of some of them, like what happens when you die, just really bloody terrifying. And the other sort of outlet that you're given with society is church. So I went to church, I went with family originally, and I've been on my own to a few different churches, and I just don't feel very at home there. I don't mind the church buildings themselves, but you know, the whole sort of rigmarole of it and the religious side of it, I've often found to be quite an ungodly place. And I am going to use the G word. I know that that has quite a bad rep nowadays. And that's something I want to talk about as well, is the way that words get sort of symbolism and a mythology built around them. And that can sometimes be used to sort of steer people in a direction or repel people from a direction. So you see that with God and spirituality. And I remember when I was having children and I wanted to have a natural birth, you're sort of put in this box of Earth Mother, hippie, doesn't really know what she's talking about, a bit unrealistic. And I've seen it over the last couple of years, you know, if you question anything about the official narrative, well, you know what you get labelled as. And it works the other way as well, in what we think of as propaganda and advertising. I mean, if you just take a product like Coca-Cola, which, no offence to anybody, but the actual product is absolute filth, really. But because of the symbolism that's put around it and the mythology, we all feel cool picking up a bottle of Coke off the shelf. So it's really important to be aware of how words have these attachments put on them. And so I know that God doesn't have the best reputation, although I should point out that my interpretation of God is not society's box or even religion's box that it's put in. And I have tried other names like universe or spirit or all that is. I don't mind the divine, though that's quite godly in itself. But I always come back to the word God. I think for me personally, I think back to when I was young and growing up, before I'd even really thought about what that word means. If I was really desperate or in trouble or really upset, I'd just think, please God, help me. And it's that deep, guttural connection and reaching out for something that I come back to, and why I think it's a worthy word that I use. So unfortunately I didn't find much of that in church. I'm going to keep looking. I know there's obviously different churches. I'm going to try the Quakers next. They're my next target. But also the other thing with religion is you have a lot of guilt and shame and rules, and I don't like any of those things. So not really the place for me. And I went on, I've had children, and all of my children have been really just massive teachers for me. So many different things, not just my spiritual journey, but so many things, not least time management, really learning to use my time and squeeze out as much as I can out of any free time. But yes, they've certainly helped me on my spiritual journey as well. So my second pregnancy that I had a number of different spiritual experiences during that pregnancy. And at the time I thought that this was a new phase in my life that I was coming into. I was wrong, it was just that I was pregnant with her. It was all coming from her. So yeah, some of the experiences that I had, and I know some of these things would be the things that people have anyway, but they were different for me. So just knowing that I was pregnant, despite a negative test, and then knowing that she was a girl a few days later. Hello, you're right. And then I realised that I could just sort of tune in and see her, or see these lights that I knew was her. And then over time that sort of took more form and became sort of baby looking. And you know, I didn't know at the time if I was just imagining it or what it was, but it didn't feel like I was imagining it. It did feel like I was looking at something that wasn't me. And I also had an experience when I was pregnant. I had to have an operation, and they didn't want to give me a general anaesthetic because of being pregnant. So there's me of the natural birth having gas and air and an epidural. But during that operation, I sort of tuned out, and I was worried about the baby because obviously everything passes the baby and the stress and everything. So I was worried about her. And I sort of tuned out and had this sort of image of us, you know, being on the beach and with her young brother and things. And again, it didn't really feel like I was imagining it. And now what I sort of learned about time and how it's probably more flexible than we're conventionally taught, it did just feel like just sort of, you know, something that was real. And yeah, so a few years later, I actually had the experience, and it was exactly as it was, down to even really strange details like my husband not being there because I'd known he wasn't there when I'd imagined it, which obviously wasn't very reassuring for our relationship when I told my husband that, but bizarrely he had to work that day, so he wasn't there with us on the beach, which normally he would have been. Oh yeah, and I should have said, when she was born, she looked exactly how I'd imagined her, like exactly, down to the fact that she even had dark hair. Because when I was imagining, visualised her being born, she always had this dark hair, and I sort of thought, that's strange, you know, her brother's very blonde, me and my husband are very blonde, surely she'll have blonde hair. And then out she came with all this lovely dark hair, as if just to reassure me that that was who I'd been seeing. And she looked exactly as she was. I remember a couple of days after I'd given birth, I had her in a sling, all sort of tucked up in this little baby hold. And I just looked down at her and it just took my breath away because it was just so exactly as I had been seeing her while I was pregnant. So that happened, and that really helped me to just open my mind to other things and other ideas, and to accept that there's so much that I don't know and don't understand, and start breaking down that sort of box of society. And questioning things, what is true, what do we really know, what's behind what we're told, and how much is just somebody's opinion. And it's become almost like a golden rule that whatever you look into in any great detail, you soon find is not how we think it is, and not how society packages it for us. And that's a really exciting and interesting journey, breaking all of that down, but it can also be quite scary as well, and depressing at times as you sort of take away everything that we know, and you can feel a bit sort of left out in space or in a bit of a vacuum of what is really real. So, some of the things that I found helpful along the way. So, the Seth books. I love the Seth books, and I just found out that David is really interested in the Seth books, so that's exciting. So obviously everybody's different and people have different things that appeal to them, but for me personally, I've just found it's the closest thing I've found to answering those big fundamental questions, and I will keep searching, but so far it's the closest thing I've found. And I even love the way that I found the Seth books. I was reading this book, Unassisted Childbirth by Laura Kaplan Shanley, because I sort of found this book. As you can see, it's sort of not in proper print book, it's not got a proper cover. But with my first pregnancy, I'd had my own unplanned unassisted childbirth, so I had a bit of an interest in this niche area and read this book. And she speaks a lot in there about the Seth books and how they helped her, and this sort of underlying idea that you create your own reality and there are no exceptions. And that's just a really powerful statement, and it's exciting and interesting, but it can also be quite a hard thing to swallow, to think that you're creating everything, including things that you're not necessarily happy with. But she sort of explains, and the books explain that it's really down to a belief system, and that if you believe something to be the case, that's the reality that you'll create. So in this book, this is about childbirth, and one of the examples she uses in there is the sort of childbirth is painful idea, which is really strongly reinforced in our society on many different levels, but it's not a universal experience through sort of time and space, but because we believe it to be the case so strongly, it is something that we create. So they've been really brilliant to read. I haven't read all of them, but I'm working my way through them. What else have I found really helpful along the way? So I've listened to a lot of the Alan Watts presentations that he's done, their sort of voice recording with a nice video on YouTube, and he's really good for talking about living joyfully and what is going on Earth, and he also is good at looking at the religious stories and what they actually symbolise, what they mean on a deeper level for our spiritual journey. He's interested in Christianity and also Eastern religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and really looking underneath the stories at what they represent symbolically. And I think that's the benefit if you can find a really good teacher to talk about things, because this is my shit analogy, but I still use it because I haven't found a better one. But religion can tend to be a bit like it's made of wood, and that religion's like it's made of metal, and that one's like it's made of plastic. But like say we're in a religion that's made of wood, and then they'll talk about how the paint's a bit different, a bit of a different colour here, and where this bit of wood meets that bit of wood, there's some little etchings, and they'll sort of go on about these details. And if you can get a really good teacher, they'll just say, it's a ladder. You know, whatever the material or the details, it's a ladder, and it's your spiritual journey, individually and as a whole. And that really seems to be the underlying message of most religions. And I've looked into a lot of them, and sort of ancient religions, and mystery traditions, and the secret societies. And they all seem to have those same underlying messages. Obviously they have their own details and there's a lot that they're trying to communicate, but it's a lot about understanding the importance of our spiritual side and that we are a spiritual entity in a physical world. And one of the things that they really come down to as well is this sort of this idea of coming from the one, coming out into duality, and then here on earth trying to bring those two things into balance, bring them together and create powerful action in the world. So those two things, or two pillars as they are in a lot of religions, you've got sort of the physical and the spiritual, the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, action and reflection, and courage and true care. And bringing those two things into balance with the knowledge and then taking them forward and producing powerful action is really a strong message lying at the bottom of sort of all the religions and traditions I've looked into. And that is the sort of holy trinity of Christianity. In Christianity, the feminine side is the Holy Spirit, because obviously you're not allowed any women in Christianity. But that's sort of the underlying message, and that's really important knowledge for everybody to know. And you know, the people who currently run the world, they do know this stuff because it's at the bottom of all the sort of secret societies, which they're all a member of some sort of secret society or group. And that is the core message, is getting your true care into balance with your courage and those whole columns, and then having powerful action in the world. And they also understand about more powerful times of the year and more powerful places where energy is stronger and how to use that energy. But obviously we can all use this information to create the world that we want to create, because that is what it's really about, is creating what you want. This knowledge isn't sort of generally widely known, and it's often hidden, and there's different reasons for that. So some of the reasons that this knowledge has been hidden in the past is that it's felt that you should go on a journey and a sort of spiritual growth journey before you learn this, so that you know how to use it responsibly. It's also been hidden at different times because at times there have been genuine efforts to destroy the information. And it's also hidden by the people who are currently using it very strongly to direct the world. Because if your sort of message to the world is that we live in this sort of system and you need a tiny little group of people at the top who have all the power and make all the decisions and control everything, and everybody else really just needs to basically do as they're told, it's not going to do you very well to let people know about their personal sovereignty and their personal power and potential and strength to create whatever world they live in. And I do believe that we can create any world we want to live in, and that is the purpose of being here. So, some of the other things that I found really helpful along the way. Talking about good teachers, so there's a YouTube channel called Kabbalah Info, and there's a series of videos on there with Dr. Michael Laitman. They're very, very good for going through sort of Old Testament stories the story, and I think they're really useful because they're stories that we know so well, that are so ingrained within us, like Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah's Ark, but he's sort of talking about them and the deeper spiritual meanings behind them. So for example, Noah, I'm going to say this in a crap way, he says it really well, but Noah's Ark is supposed to be about taking yourself away, seclusion, away from human desires and human needs, and just being with your sort of animal self and all your, and working through things spiritually. He talks about it in a much better way. It's really, really good and inspiring to listen to. What other things? Yes, so talking about sort of what's going on and trying to take control of stuff. There's a good website called What on Earth is Happening. That's Mark Passio who does that. I don't think he's on YouTube, but he's on sort of other platforms like Odyssey, and he's got his own website, and there's tons of podcasts and great video lectures on there, and he talks a lot about natural law and how things are actually happening in the world and how things should be happening and what we can be working towards. He can come across as a bit aggressive because he's very passionate about things. Personally, I don't have a problem with that. I think, our aggression and passion, as long as it's channeled effectively, it can be a tool to try and actually push things forward. But he's really, really good. He's got a lot of knowledge. I don't mind that. Sometimes when I look into an area and people are very gentle and softly spoken and it's all lovely, I think, oh God, don't think I'm going to fit in there. So everybody's different and he's really, really good. I've absolutely flown through this. So some of the other things I've found useful are looked into tarot, and that's really interesting. And again, the tarot is quite strongly linked to Kabbalah and the sort of messages of that, of going through this long spiritual journey through different lives and identifying with different people. And the whole thing of tarot is that you're supposed to go through every card in your experience. And that's been really helpful to learn about. I would say as well that there's nothing that I would say, that's it, that's the thing you have to follow and be interested in. Everything is a tool to be learned from, including the Seth books, which are my favourite so far. Everything's a tool to just sort of learn about and open our mind and help us along. And tarot can be really useful for that. It's got a lot of layers as well, so that's good. What else? This book I found really good, The Continuum Concept by Jean Liedloff. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But that's really good for just looking, it says it's about babies, but I think it's really about our whole society and just stepping back and looking at it inside its box and seeing it for what it really is and the very bizarre and strange things that we do, which are supposed to be normal. That's really good. I'm also looking at anarchism at the moment. That's my sort of a new area of interest because that's a no rules sort of thing. So that's interesting. My ideas of anarchism sort of either came from, Rick from the Young Ones or pissing up a wall against a big A sign. So it's really interesting to look at it at that deeper level because that's what sort of society's taught me about it. That's the veneer that I know about it. But now looking at it at a deeper level and how it can be actually taken seriously and used seriously, that's really good. I'm also quite into near-death experiences. They're really interesting. Listening to what people talk about, really just amazing and mind-expanding. Oh, do you know what I didn't say about the Seth books? I didn't say what they actually are. So, the Seth books, so Seth is a spiritual entity being channeled by this woman, Jane Roberts, and her husband, Robert F. Butts, is taking the notes, and then they turn all that into a book. I know some people might be a bit sceptical of that, like, oh, it's a spiritual entity being channeled, could be faked or whatever. And Jane and Rob themselves at the beginning were a bit like, is this, are we really channeling a spirit, or is it just coming out of Jane's subconscious? But they looked at the material, and the material itself is just really, really good. It's really, really high quality material. And I think if people can come at it with that open mind, even if they don't know exactly where it comes from, just look at the actual material. It's really, really good. Right, is there anything else I wanted to talk about? I've absolutely flown through this like I knew I would. Has anybody got any questions?
Would you be able to send us an email out just with the topics you've just spoken about, just so we can look
Yeah, I can do. And I've also got a bit of paper there and some pens. If people can write down, I've written down a few of the things that I've spoken about. But yeah, I can do that. And yeah, anybody else that can add to that, anything that they think is really, really useful and yeah, really good, because sometimes it can be like you've got to go through a lot of crap to get to the good stuff when yeah, when you're looking into things. So, yeah.
Humphries, and I work as a spiritual coach a lot of the time. I use quite a few different tools in my work, so I would describe myself as a holistic coach and therapist. So I use Reiki as part of my work, and shadow work, conscious creation, some of the ideas that came up in the set material, and work very much intuitively. So that's what I did. I came across Reiki through Dave, funny enough, who taught me back in the 90s. So that was interesting, and then didn't see him for another 20 years or something. And the journey continued. So yeah, that's kind of me really.
Morning everybody, it's the morning. Slightly hungover, slightly off the whack, it'll be okay. So I started, my background was really started when I was about 3, so I had an out-of-body experience. I found myself looking at my body, lots of different experiences, at that age, out-of-body experiences, going to different places and then asking people who lived in the places, was that right? And then found that it was right. And so all those types of things. And essentially that introduced me to the idea that your consciousness is not wholly connected to your body. Okay, and that's really the fundamental point about what spirituality is, I would say, which is understanding that you are not your body. In truth, there's nothing physical happening here in any way, shape or form. And that kind of understanding kind of stayed with me since then. So I opened up, I started doing healing when I was about 20, went around somebody's house. There was a healer there, took the mick out of her quite a bit, even though I'd had these experiences, so I wasn't kind of really open to it. She was far too woo-woo for me, so you know, she was way too kind of not grounded, and at the time I was running restaurants, so I had 13, 15 restaurants with whipped bread. I've always found that I want practical use, maybe that's my approach to it, but fundamentally I found that actually she invited me to do some healing on my friend who was in the army, had a bad back, put my hands on and all this kind of energy arrived, which children which scared the Jesus out of me at the time. My body experiences didn't come with any particular feeling. They were extreme, well, except they were pleasant. This was much more like getting an electric shock. Adrian's back got better in about 2 minutes. I went, what the is going on here? And that kind of opened up another level of awareness. So I started to do channeling and all that kind of stuff, wrote a few books. And fundamentally, the main thing to help you, if you're interested to understand, is that because there's nothing, the reason that you're able to do all these things is because it's not a physical environment. I know it looks it, and it feels it, and it sounds it. But spirituality is all about understanding that your identity is not wholly based around your physical body. Your physical body is not physical in the way that we think of it, which is where your mind and body are connected, things like hypnosis work and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to talk about in today's Reiki. So I opened up a Reiki school in '97. I was a healer for 10 years full time and taught lots of people. But the main crux of it always comes down to this idea that your energy, your focus of attention creates an experience. And the reason it creates an experience kind of alludes to what the Seth material would talk about, discovered my own channeling, however many years ago, that you can focus this energy, you can focus your attention, you're part of it, it's part of you, and wherever you kind of focus your attention, there will be an effect. And the reason there's an effect is because everything is energy. And that gets us into kind of Reiki and law of attraction, all that kind of stuff. It's all the same stuff. There is no difference between it. It's all just energy now. and it works. You can work it, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about, I suppose.
Yeah, so we just thought we'd ask, first of all, who has, and just show of hands, who's heard of Reiki? Who's experienced Reiki? Either doing it, receiving it? Has anyone learnt to do it?
I've practiced on myself once a week.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. So Reiki is entirely natural. We're all natural healers. We know this because when we cut ourselves, we fall over, we don't die or disappear. We naturally heal, our body naturally heals. So that's a natural process that goes on for us. So Reiki is kind of a continuation of that, isn't it, really? So really important for us to know that it is entirely natural, and you don't need anything special to do that. So yes, you can learn Reiki. Obviously we teach Reiki, but many people will come to it naturally. I think you might mention, you kind of get a natural sense of that, and it comes through, which of course is exactly how it is. So as Dave said, everything is energy. So that's why these things work. And everything that we can imagine, envisage, our thoughts, the whole range of everything we experience and see is all made up of energy. So there's no end of you. And often we think that we kind of end here, or maybe a little bit more if we have an aura, which we hear these things. But actually, there's no end. Everything is connected. So that allows us to understand a bit of how Reiki can actually work. So
I think the main thing is to understand why would you bother with Reiki? Why would you take a Reiki course, all that kind of stuff? And I think the reason is because it introduces you to cast iron ideas that you can prove that exist outside of your physical senses. So the whole journey to understand kind of who you are. So you start with physical, and it feels solid. And, we might have intuitions, we might have experiences, all those types of things. But Reiki means universal energy. The history of it is a bit, go on the internet, find 25,000 histories. Don't worry about it. It's all stories, basically. But fundamentally, the idea of Reiki is that it introduces you to an understanding that everything is energy. And that's the main point of it. That's the whole reason that anyone should explore it. There are various types of Reiki. They all do the same thing. Fundamentally, they will introduce you to the understanding and the experience. So all of a sudden, you don't know about healing. It's just an idea. You go on a course, you're able to do some zapping on somebody, they get better. And what that does is that then shows you maybe that you're different to how you thought. Also introduces them to some different ideas. But one of the main areas in your own spiritual development is confidence. So it's turning something conceptual into something concrete, something that you can experience. And when you experience it, it builds your confidence, and that's another stepping stone on the ladder, whatever it's made of. Whatever, it's all the same stuff. On that ladder, and you're able to take a step forward and say, okay, well, that's interesting. And that's why Reiki is so useful. It is not an end in itself. There's far more.
Reiki, I think a lot of people come to Reiki because, interestingly, they start out with that physical thing, don't they, of Reiki being a healing tool. I've got an ache, I've got a pain, and so they come to Reiki for it to be something that they can use to heal themselves, heal others, or perhaps do it as an add-on, do therapies and then think, oh, Reiki's a good one, I'll add that on. So, we all come to it from different angles, but often it is just thinking of it as something that we can do for physical ailments. And the really interesting thing about Reiki is why. We don't always stop to ask, why does it work? Why does it work? We can often be just content to do that. We go along, we do the course, we heal our friends, we heal our family, we heal the dog. This is great, we managed to create a car parking space. Fantastic, Reiki's amazing. But actually Reiki is so much more. So the important question is to consider, why does Reiki work? Why does it work? That's where the self-development starts to begin. That's where it becomes more than just a tool that we can use in our lives, and actually something that can really enrich and inform and create our whole self-development. So it's actually a whole self-development system, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you think about where you're trying, well, I mean, that's a question. What do you think spirituality is? Because, you know, we're here talking about self-awareness and spirituality, but people find it quite tricky to define it. And it's like anything, if you don't know where you're going, then that's the reason there are so many different conceptual ideas about what it is and how it works, is because people are often reticent to decide what it is. You know, they think they're going to make a mistake, which you can't do. But fundamentally, what do you think spirituality is? It's not a thing. A lot of people say, well, it makes me feel like this. And, okay, but that doesn't define what it is. Coffee makes me feel good in the morning. It doesn't kind of define what coffee is. What is spirituality?
It's different for everyone, isn't it? We've all got a different view of what spirituality is, and it works differently for different people.
No. And I can only say that because I've been teaching for like 35 years. And that's conceptually, I understand exactly what you mean, but conceptually, spirituality is not going to be a feeling. We have individual feelings, you know, so people have individual feelings about Reiki, what it feels like, and that type of thing, and they think that's what Reiki is, you know.
And experiences.
And experiences and all that kind of stuff. But what do you think spirituality is?
I'm going to start with awareness, consciousness.
Awareness, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Awareness of
Yourself.
who said myself?
Of everything. Of yourself and your world. I don't know. The consciousness, the higher.
Yeah, and these are ideas that are really good in terms of Reiki and things to kind of shoot down pretty quickly, which is there's no higher consciousness. Okay? There is broader consciousness, i.e. there's parts of yourself that are able to bring in more information and do things like healing and all that kind of stuff. But there's no higher consciousness. That's something that's really good to kind of, as you move into understanding the kind of practical ways to apply this. If one thinks that there's a higher consciousness, one tends to think that it's better than us. It plays very much into the Christian idea of heaven, hell, and all the rest of it. And that's all a nonsense. There's stories made up by religious people. So spirituality, I would suggest, it's a broadening of one's awareness of oneself and reality. And when you do that, and that fundamentally means that you're going to be heading outside of the five senses. If you think about it, spirituality is the world beyond your five senses, isn't it? And we use science to define this really badly, and then we go outside of it and we start to think about, well, what is it and how does it work? And that's why Reiki is good, because it takes you outside of your normal consciousness and it begins to expand your awareness into a world outside of yourself, well, that appears outside of yourself. It's not. It appears that way initially, but it also is outside of your five senses. And that's why things like Reiki are really good, because it takes you into that world in a kind of grounded way. It's a long explanation. But the whole idea of all this stuff is you understand where you're going.
So yeah, Reiki introduces you to a different version of yourself and really opens you up to a lot more information, if you want to think of it that way. So it takes you into sort of the psychic realm, and our first language is psychic. So that the baby is already, communicating psychically long before there's anything else, going on, like words and all of that. And actually with us, because we're energetic beings, every interaction we have is all taking place on the psychic level long before it takes place which is how we get the coincidences and all of that. So it's really all about that expanding into more of yourself and seeing a different version of yourself, and then taking the opportunity to explore, what does that mean? What can I do with that? You know, what does that really mean? I've made notes so we don't go off on massive tangents, because as you can imagine, we can. So it can be a practical help, but it also opens the doors to your psychic development, and also the understanding of yourself as an immortal being, which sounds like something out of a vampire film, doesn't it? But you are immortal, as Dave often says, you know, you're as dead now as you'll ever be, which is, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really understanding, it's kind of turning everything about on its head, and really becoming aware of yourself as an immortal being. And then that really opens you up to so much more, because if you didn't think you were going to die, you didn't have to spend your life being scared you were going to die, and that you were going to kind of live forever and have this, you know, all these expanded, interesting experiences, then what might you do with your life? How might you live differently? Have these different understandings?
And that's a really interesting question. As you kind of go through, you understand energy more. So for example, if we were to remove all your senses right now, to remove every single sense you have, which is only 5, okay, so you got your 5 senses, if we were to just remove them, would you still exist? Would you still exist? Yeah? Yeah, you would exist. But so how would you exist? How would you exist?
Consciousness.
Yeah, you would be awareness. So spirituality is really trying to move you outside of these 5 senses and move you into something where you're understanding yourself as consciousness, but it's not limited to just the 5 senses. So what would happen if you stayed, you know, just took away your 5 senses for like 24 hours? You begin to develop different experiences. You might begin to dream. In some way, you might have sensations and feelings and awarenesses. You still have memories. You know, you'd still be you, wouldn't you? And that's just another version of death. Just remove yourself from the 5 senses, you still exist. You're still you. You never lose yourself. But you begin to tune in to these other energetic systems and experiences, and you'll realise you are literally now as you're ever going to be. You are immortal, quite literally. And the thing about that, as Claire says, is you might ask yourself, how would that change me if I had an experience of that? So if you knew this was one lifetime out of many, you will exist. You existed before, you exist now, you exist after. None of it's physical. That's kind of ultimately where Reiki takes you, or an understanding of energy. Reiki's a way, an understanding of energy takes you to. So it's quite an interesting thing to think about. Because you are literally immortal, and that's dead now as you're ever going to be. You will find out when you die that you're immortal. The great thing is you can find out you're immortal before you die, and then live a very different life than you do already maybe. You might fundamentally change how you approach each moment or yourself. And that's another benefit of breaking out of your 5 senses.
And often we, I think, experience that in simple terms of, you know, like closing our eyes. You know, often when we go to do something, don't we, that's kind of more spiritual, some kind of practice, we know, we close our eyes, and that's a nice easy way to get a sense, because we kind of close, you know, our eyes are so, you know, just aware, right? We're taking in everything all the time and getting the brain working, and actually often when we close our eyes and take a breath, and then we can just drop into something completely different, and it just allows us to kind of like disengage one of those very powerful senses, and then we can start to focus on that inner journey of what's going on. So that can really help us to just get into that. You know, that's just dropping one sense. You know, it can be really powerful just to help you, you know, to sort of get an experience of that. I mean, if I sit here and close my eyes now, then I will start to feel that energy, Actually, maybe we should do that. Should we do that? Let's just see what happens. Let's just play, shall we? Just go a bit off the script. So let's invite you to close your eyes if you feel safe. And it can be quite nice to put your feet on the ground. And feel the points of contact that you have against whatever is supporting you. The ground, the chair, your back, your legs, your feet. Letting those eyes be really soft. And using the breath can really help you to get out of that busy mind. Our brains can often be whirring. And so taking a nice breath in through the nose and exhaling longer than your inhale sends a lovely message to the mind to let you know you're safe. And allows you to relax a little bit more. And if you need to take a few more of those breaths, do. And reminding yourself that you are safe. And allowing your edges to soften and expand. And just be open to more information. And that may not come now. May come later. You're not trying to force anything or do anything. It's an invitation to open up to more. Because this is your natural state. Being connected to all that is. There is no separation in this place. You're part of everything that you can imagine. You are immortal, and utterly powerful. You are energy, and you are so loved. Keep breathing. When thoughts come, let them go. And you may be able to feel the sense of energy. You might feel that in your hands. And if you don't, that's okay. Just know it's there anyway, because that's who you are. I didn't feel it for years, so don't let that affect your experience. Just trusting. It's really about trusting, feeling safe, and opening up to more. It's like putting out a little invitation. And it's not to the universe, because you are the universe. It's you, allowing yourself to expand. Everything you need. You are connected to all that is. And then slowly, when you're ready, coming back into your body, taking your focus just behind your eyes. And then opening your eyes when you're ready. How did that feel? Everyone's looking very peaceful. If you feel you'd like to, shout out a few words or share something.
I tend to see a lot of shapes and images when I do that sort of thing. Lots of animals and triangles and things like that. Always really relaxing.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for sharing.
Absorbing a lot of energy in my hands.
Yeah. For me, that's where I tend to feel it most as well. In the hands.
Tingling as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tingling heat is very common.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Anyone else? So sometimes, and like I say, I used to be the person that used to go to these kind of events and everyone would be like, oh, I can see this and that, and there's dolphins leaping through my vision, and there's this, and there's purple, and there's crystals, and I'd be the one that'd be sitting there going like, oh no, nothing. So if that's you, I hear you. Psychically, I hear you. So I just want you to know that is your natural state, but because of how we're brought up to be physical humans, we kind of lose that connection in a sense, but it's always there, so you can grow that journey by doing something as simple as that, connecting to it, and the healing, perhaps talk a little bit about the healing.
Yeah, so I think if you think about what it is that you actually did there, so to close your eyes, remove yourself from the five senses, remove your ideas of colour and shape and all that kind of stuff. And by doing that, what you enable yourself to do is to connect with what you could call your inner senses. So if you think about the world you're in, you've got outer senses, finally, show you this world. You make a lot of judgments about that. Then the inner senses are the ones that are developing when you start to see shapes and that type of thing. And the thing about the inner senses, called psychic senses, a bit of a loaded term, but the inner senses is that they're undefined at the minute. So I think Liz will talk about channeling later on. So Liz's inner senses are more tuned, so you've been practicing for a lot longer, removing limiting ideas about how they work and how they don't work, and what they are and what's possible and what's not possible. The thing about understanding what you just did is that is healing, fundamentally. Healing is about bringing yourself back to a natural state of health and wellness, whatever that would be for you. But fundamentally, it's refreshing. So you may feel refreshed, close your eyes for a few minutes, and that's because your natural state is not physical. It's not, your unnatural state isn't physical either. It's, we are here for a reason, to explore who we are, but your natural state is healthy, relaxed, chilled out, energetic, motivated, and
there's no separation, is there?
Well,
it's really important.
Yes, it's having an actual experience of your connectedness to yourself and experiences outside of the five senses. Being solely within the five senses is very lonely. So I'm told, I've never experienced it, frankly. But I imagine being isolated in your five senses, trying to understand the world where science is just heading you down this catastrophic route of misunderstanding, against the world such a mess, the way it is. But when you can just turn inward, that's what a Reiki session does fundamentally. I mean, everything is Reiki, everything's universal energy. But a Reiki session, I'm not saying that, but a Reiki session it's a way for you to tune out of your five senses, get back into your senses that are primary, So your inner senses are your primary senses. Your 5 senses are not. They are a feedback system, which ultimately will lead you back to the 7 material understanding, that type of thing. So that's where Reiki kind of takes you. You know, it takes you into a place where you begin to rely on yourself, your inner self, much more than the 5 senses. Your 5 senses are lovely liars. They'll tell you that it's solid. They'll tell you that it's real. It's none of those things at all. Even a quick trip down science will tell you that. They're lovely liars. You can't rely on them except to count your bank balance, drive a car, know where the coffee is. Very few things. The rest of them you should be relying on your primary senses. And that's why Reiki is so good. That's why all spiritual systems, a few spiritual systems are good, because they enable you to come back to yourself fundamentally, expand your consciousness and your awareness. They put the 5 senses in context. It's one tiny little slice of your broader identity, and therefore you stop relying on them as much. And when you do that, life gets a lot better. So,
yeah, sorry, I was going to lead on to that, you know, we're brought up in a society where it's very much kind of very mind-based, and so, you know, science and the mind and all of that is very much king. So what happens is that we kind of get sucked into that, and that takes us away from who we really are. It takes us away from our intuition, it takes us away from our knowing, our experience of who we are, our experience of being connected and cooperative, and it creates a world where, you know, where we can often feel really separate and isolated, and, you know, and it can feel like we're struggling and really pushing and striving to create things. And I know I've spent a lot of my life like that, you know, really in kind of action and, you know, trying to create things that way. And so when you understand this stuff, it's very much, it's very liberating, because you realise that you don't have to create in that way, because you are a powerful creator, which you probably don't know. I'm guessing no one's ever told you you're a really powerful creator. You create your reality, you create your experience. So that leads you to opportunities. It's an opportunity to think, oh, what do I actually want? What do I want? You know, what's really important to me? What do I want to create here? And often people think, oh, you know, my purpose, I'm spending my life looking for this elusive purpose. How many of us have been there? Like, oh, I wonder what my purpose is. It's not something out there that you need to find, it's something that you actually have the power to create. If you want to take responsibility and you want to explore, then that's what we kind of need to do, really, is to tune in to more of that version of ourselves, that, as Dave said, the broader self. Because in that place, we are intuitive, we are connected to everything, to all that is, thoughts, emotions, feelings, ideas, probabilities, what you think of as past, future lives. They're all there in that kind of big ocean available to you. So that's very empowering. It's really empowering. Stuff isn't just happening to you if you want to take responsibility. And conversely to what we think, we need to go on that journey that I just gave you a tiny slice of, is go inside ourselves. Because when we go in there, then we find that connected place. I don't know about you, but I came out of that, even just leading it, feeling like, oh, I feel so calm, I feel relaxed, I feel connected. There was no thought, it was just a peacefulness. And that tells me that I'm not in that doing mode, I'm in being mode, I'm connected, I'm in love, I'm in life, and I can do what I want with that. I have control, in a sense. Control is a loaded term, but, you know, it's an opportunity, let's say that, it's an opportunity. So then it's like, well, what do I want to do with that? Because I'm a creator. I'm not just here to experience. I can create, not just car parking spaces either. I create my experience. If I want to take responsibility for my experience and take responsibility for my power, because I am a creator, I'm immortal. So that's kind of expanding the world of what you think of as your world.
If I just touch on something there, which is Intellect and intelligence are not the same thing. Okay, your intellect is woefully unintelligent, incapable of understanding yourself. It's incapable of understanding reality. It's incapable of a gazillion and one different things because it's based on the five senses. So we raise up the intellect because of the nature of our kind of history and how that's kind of played out. We raise up the intellect as the kind of the archetypal number one thing. But actually, intellect, it's stuck. Well, where is your intellect stuck? Just throw it out there, get you thinking. So, where is your intellect stuck? Where is its limit? You could say it's in your memory banks. Yeah, so it's limited, but it's limited in other ways as well, isn't it? You're right. Yeah, cool. Which place is it limited in? Your intellect is only ever in now, isn't it? It's only ever in trying to judge, survive in the present moment. And the reason that that's woefully limited is because your broader consciousness spans time and experiences time in a very different way. And so the reason that we have kind of experiences that come in, coincidences, all that kind of stuff, they're actually far more rock-bed reality than the intellect. The intellect can show you one snapshot of where you are right now. And as Claire was saying, because it's been such a loaded term historically, and there's actually nothing going wrong, by the way. Our history is exactly kind of where it needs to be in order for us to develop further. So it's not as though we're victims to the past and that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, things like Reiki, when taught well, which I also want to just touch on, Reiki, when taught well, will help you understand that your intellect is one tiny snapshot. It's massively unreliable. You should rely on it for counting your bank balance and a couple of things. But once you kind of go outside of that, which is really what the spiritual search is, isn't it? So do that. Actually feel empowered. You know, you went outside of your five senses for a few seconds and you felt a bit more chilled out, whatever. So imagine if you were to make that your primary experience and that this is your secondary experience. It's great here. You know, I love it. I love being human. But I'm not human. And neither are you. Not in the truest sense. We will never see each other because I'm energy, you're energy. I don't really look like this, except here. You look like this here, but that's not really what you ultimately look like. But we can experience each other in very different ways. And that's what things like, that's what Reiki taught well, spirituality taught well does. So it removes the barriers to that experience, and you will eventually go, you may have done it already, wow, okay, that's what it is then. Okay, you drop the physical much more. You appreciate it, love it. We went out and played music last night. Had a great time. I drank too many beers. I thoroughly enjoyed that and all that kind of stuff, or whatever. But I'm still not physical. I may look like this, but I'm still not physical. There's nothing physical happening, and that's why it's empowering, because you lean back on your natural, empowering, relaxed state. So your intellect is not intelligence.
Yeah, life really takes us out of that, doesn't it, a lot of the time. You know, we can get really caught up in this kind of busy life and doing stuff, as I was saying earlier. And, you know, our mind is really about keeping us safe, which is great. That's fantastic. That's really, really useful. That's what it wants to do. Its role is to keep us safe. But the way that it does that is that it's always scanning for what it knows and what feels safe. And a lot of the time it's finding stuff that didn't feel safe and reminding us of that. So we're like, oh, don't do that. Remember when you were 5 and you did that? That was really bad. So don't do that again. And so that can be really limiting. We can live our whole life within the mind without realising. And often what I used to find before I became aware of this, as I say, was going into this kind of pushing, doing mode. And actually what I've learned is the opposite, is what we did there for those few precious minutes was to actually relax which goes against what we think, doesn't it? It's like in normal life, when we're busy and we're caught up, oh my God, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do this, and we get in that kind of, you know, hyper mode. And when we're in that mode, actually even science will tell you, because I teach this a lot of the time with my clients around trauma and the body, that actually when we're in that mode, we've actually gone into fight or flight, we've gone into survival mode. And actually, if we're in human knowledge terms, you have 3 brains, and the one that has the logic and rational experience going on goes offline when we get into what the body feels like as trauma. Goes offline because when a tiger's chasing you, you don't need to stop and think, I wonder which tree I'll climb up. You just need to get the hell out there as fast as you can. So, you know, science and biology will want to go in that road because the brain likes to know these things, doesn't it? So it's important for us to realise that actually we have power. So when we're in those situations, the most important thing, the most empowering thing we can do is come back to ourselves. And the breath is brilliant for that. So we can just take a breath, come back and start to relax and realise, oh yeah, I'm not physical. I don't have to forcefully try and push and create from that kind of ego kind of personality way. Actually, I can just relax and step back and step into who I really am. I can step into what you think of as the universe. But it's not the universe, because that's outside of you. It's your broader self, it's you that's connected to all that is. And that's where your power is. Because in that place you're unlimited. You'll never die. You're magic.
You also have access to a vast amount of information that's not available to you in the 5 senses. So if you're relying on the 5 senses, I mean, on one hand, if you get yourself into tricky situations, your relaxation is your superpower. Relaxation is a superpower. So you know, the more you chill out, the more you relax, the more you allow other information in, hey, life's better. So that's cool. And you end up not getting yourself into those tricky situations in the first place because you're not creative. Okay, you're not, because we venture into law of attraction and all that kind of stuff. You know, once you kind of move through the Reiki system, that's where everything goes, that's the pyramid. You create your own reality. So you don't get yourself in those situations in the first place, but if you think of a muscle, most people are trying to create kind of out there, that's what use the intellect, and they're trying to understand all this stuff intellectually as well, which is also possible. Pointless. Okay, just go around in circles. So your main muscle, the muscle that you have, is actually your inner self. So to come back to that in any situation you can, is a much, much more practical, reliable thing to do. But what you must do is remove your limiting beliefs at the same time. So there's no higher self, okay? There's nobody better than you. There's no spirit going, I'm better than you, you're down there, and whatever. That's religious nonsense. And I just wanted to touch on some limiting ideas around Reiki, because we kind of touched on Reiki as well. So we learn Reiki with something, don't we? So you might have heard it. Who's heard about Reiki attunements? Are we okay to touch on this? Who's heard about Reiki attunements? What have you heard about? You have to have them? And all that kind of stuff. Sorry, everybody's going to get into trouble, don't worry. I want to liberate you. So there is this idea with Reiki that, so Reiki, the original Reiki didn't have attunements. Okay, you know, it was based out of Taoism and Buddhism. There was no attunements. Attunements came in much later on. So one of the most disempowering things about Reiki are attunements, because you have to go to somebody else to empower you. So if you imagine that your spiritual search is about knowing yourself, understanding who you are, understanding that you don't need, that you are all that is, you are whatever it is, but then you're required, in order to learn this thing, to go to somebody else who does these magical things, and all of a sudden you can do Reiki. Yeah. That is completely disempowering, and it's nonsense. You don't need, the whole beauty of Reiki is that it's an understanding that you have it already. You do not need attunements. Attunement comes from the word atonement, which comes from the word at one-ment. You are already at one. You don't need somebody else to at-one you. Okay? So if you're going to learn Reiki, just try and remember that these are rituals, just like the Catholic rituals. Doing the incense, they are based around people's beliefs, and they're based around intellectual ideas of we're less than, spirit is up here. In order to connect with spirit, we need somebody else, a priest, a Reiki teacher, a guru, whatever it is, to somehow connect us. Okay, that's not true. You can do, the beauty of Reiki is that you shouldn't be having attunements. Now that doesn't mean you don't take some time to tune in, like you did there, and experience things, but does it empower you to have to go to somebody else to connect you? Or does it disempower you? Disempower you. Of course it does. So one of the things to look out for is if you are doing, and it's tricky, I know, because if you do learn Reiki, most people tell you have to have attunements. But when you go along and do it, just go along bearing in mind that the reason you're having the attunement is really based upon the teacher's belief, which is an intellectual one, so nothing to do with what's actually happening energetically, and accept it, accept the attunement, and do it with the awareness that you're kind of just, you're accepting the gift to yourself. You're not accepting it from another. No other person can make you more spiritual, more powerful, whatever. And bear in mind that attunements were never, ever, ever, ever in the original Reiki system. They came into Reiki when it got very westernized, all the way around, and people wanted to charge a whole ton of money to attune you to Reiki masters and all that kind of stuff. And that's where they came from. So, slightly radical view, maybe not. But if you do take Reiki seriously, just bear in mind that as well. And other disempowering things,
Yeah, I was going to say, just mention about, how that's like the beliefs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a belief that you need it. It's not true. Okay, 99% of the beliefs you have are not true. Most people have never had an original thought because we're just reliving our parents. We're reliving their parents and we're just trying to survive. So understanding this stuff generally will throw you out of that cycle, if you like. But particularly in terms of Reiki, when I started teaching Reiki back in '97, there was some weird shit going on. People were doing naked Reiki up in London, not me. Right? They were saying, you've got to be naked to do it, the energy doesn't go through clothes. And then they were saying, you've got to wear white, man, because everything's peace and love and all that kind of stuff. It's all rubbish. It's all based upon people's ideas of what it is, not really what it is. So just be aware of that. You don't need a crystal to empower you. Crystals are lovely. They work by piezoelectricity. We understand all that type of thing. But fundamentally, you're the one believing it will give you the power. Your belief about it, your belief about the attunement, your belief about anything will play itself out energetically because everything's universal energy. That's what Reiki's all about. Everything's energy, man. And whatever you think it is. Crystals are lovely. We have some, don't we?
Yeah, but we don't subscribe any particular powers to them.
But we don't subscribe any particular powers to them.
Because we know that's...
Because it's not physically empowerment. So I could ascribe physical, the power to a chair just as much as a crystal or a candle or a mandala or a dream catcher, whatever.
And that's really important to realise.
And that's not to knock them. They're great fun. They're great fun and they're lovely. But you're disempowering yourself like an attunement if you fall into the trap of thinking that somehow these upgrade your energy. They don't. The belief in that actually downgrades your energy because you think it's the... If we were told over the years, if there was a chair religion, we were told to pray the chairs, we'd be praying the chairs. It's like we think, the blue chair's better than the green chair, that kind of stuff. It's not true. Everything's energy. It's all equal. You ascribe to it whatever it is that you want. Same with attunements.
Yeah, we're very much about the most empowering version of anything that we do. It's really about empowering others, helping people to empower themselves, and that does often mean, usually means, challenging your beliefs and questioning your beliefs, becoming aware of your beliefs. So, and breaking the sacred cows, not being afraid to question, it's like, dare I mention, chakras. That'll set him off. And but it's important to remember, as Dave just said, you know, I can subscribe a magical power to my necklace. I can say, like I would a crystal or whatever it is. And so, you know, this star is going to keep me safe. This star is going to keep me safe. And then what happens when it breaks? What happens if I lose it? Oh my God. You know, something catastrophic is going to happen. I've given my power to the star. It's just a star. But the important thing about that to realise is that it's my belief that's creating that. So if I can believe that the star can be some magical force, why not believe that I can be the magical force? Why not take responsibility and put it where it belongs in the most empowering way? So even things like the universe, oh, the universe has done this for me. You're creating the universe, it's your reality, it's your universe. So you can choose the disempowering version, which is, this happens to me, or you can choose to step into your power and your magnificence, your infinite, immortal, stunningly beautiful, incredible selves, and say, yeah, I have power here, I have power, I'm not, you know, stuck in believing that something else is giving me this, or something else just happens to have, wow, look, you know, the universe has done this, or oh, my crystal has done, you know, has done that.
A lot of the times that can feel quite disconnecting, I will say. Okay, so once we're on spiritual search and self-awareness, we've got our crystals and we love them, we've got our stars. It's a very pretty star, right? There's nothing wrong with it, right? It looks lovely chair, that kind of stuff. So it can feel as though one is being, you know, having everything taken away from you. You know, that, oh, it's not about the attunement, or it's not about this or about that kind of stuff. And that's a very natural reaction for people to have. They kind of feel a bit, you know, what do I get to rely on then? That's fundamentally where we go. And of course, the place you get to rely on is you and your use of energy. So it can feel slightly disconnecting, a bit jarring sometimes to remove these crutches that we have. And that's all cool. I'm not saying anyone should stop taking their pills or stop eating your lovely yogurt or do whatever it is you're going to do, carry on, whatever it is you enjoy. But fundamentally, if you look at a lot of the spiritual systems, they're all ending up at the law of attraction. You look at a lot of the teachers, self-awareness teachers, it's all a big pyramid, and that's because that's where it goes. It all goes there. It all goes there with the understanding. Of course, it goes further from there as well, but it all goes to the understanding that everything is energy. Your use of energy is what is fundamentally how you expand your awareness, and because you do that, you gain more sense of self. So it's all going to go there. It's been going there for 20 years. It's been going there forever, right? And it will go there, it will go beyond it. But I just wanted to cover one last sacred cow, which is, in a nice way, which is the Reiki symbols. Okay. So who's heard of the Reiki symbols? You know what I'm saying. Who's heard of the Reiki symbols now? Okay, right. So Reiki, yes. Okay, so Reiki symbols are a bit like the star and the crystal, that type of thing. They came into Reiki not originally, weren't in the original Reiki system, right? But you can go into Buddhist temples, you can see the Reiki symbols all over the place. They're symbols that are used in attunement. They are symbols. I can draw it, but I can't, draw it. When I first started Reiki, someone brought out the Reiki book with the Reiki symbols. You had to buy it under the counter, so you weren't allowed to show them publicly because they were supposed to disempower you, right? So we went and bought this book by Diane Steen, and it had the Reiki symbols in it. And people would say, "I can't send you the book." And I said, "Okay, just give me the book." And the guy sold it to me in a brown paper bag. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he went, "It's against the Reiki Federation and all that." And that's not true, actually. To be in the Reiki Federation all those years ago. It's all these things are the Reiki symbols, and there are lots of versions of Reiki. It's Buddha Reiki and all those kind of things. Reiki symbols are just, what do you think they are? What do you think the Reiki symbols are? Based on this little introduction.
It's supposed to be something you can channel your thoughts and energy.
Yes, exactly. To channel your thoughts and energy. So if somebody gives you a Reiki, nobody can make you a Reiki master, right? All that kind of stuff. You do the training, you should learn to be a teacher. That's what it should be about, not an attunement. So the Reiki symbols are an anathema. They are added in quite late on in the Reiki system to try and speed up people's training. That's why they were added in. It's not going to help you at all in any way, shape or form. Having said that, they're a great way to begin to use your energy. So if you're doing a Reiki system, or you're looking at a Reiki system, they have symbols, then you can, okay, as you said perfectly rightly, it's not that, there's no power in the symbol. There's no power in the symbol. So a lot of Reiki systems that don't know that will have loads of Reiki. Karuna Reiki's like got about 3,000 symbols and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit like having 10 watches on your arm and thinking you've got more time. Right? It's nonsense. It's not true. Okay? It's just because having more, what do you think having more symbols is supposed to do? Exactly. What they're saying is this is a more powerful Reiki system than this. Okay? Right? Okay? But actually, if we're learning about energy and how we focus our attention, then a singular focus of attention is much more powerful than a totally disparate focus of attention to 20,000 symbols you've got to learn before you can play your Boulter and do all this kind of stuff. Actually, it does the opposite. It does the opposite. So, more Reiki symbols doesn't give you any more power. Okay? If you are going to take Reiki, and actually Reiki should be taught at school, I think, but taught well at school. That's the caveat. So it should be taught at school, an understanding of healing and how it works, all that type of thing. But just watch out if you ever take a Reiki course where you're going to disempower yourself. If somebody says you've got to learn 30 symbols before you get to Reiki 2, just kind of have a little...
Cleanse your chakras.
Yeah, chakras don't exist, guys. Let me just throw that out there. That's a real chakra. But anyway, this is about Reiki. Part of Reiki is that part of Reiki is that you attune the chakras and all that kind of stuff. Chakras also are worth challenging. I'll just leave that there. They're definitely worth challenging, whether they exist or not. I do in my life, they don't. I used to have a spiritual library when I had a spiritual centre. We probably had 300 books in them. 200 were about crystals, 40 were about chakras. I read them all. I read everything because it was interesting. I read them all, and I promise you, things like that, and I don't mean if you know, things like that will end up disempowering you and not empowering you. The first books around chakras were saying if they go a particular way, you're a psychopath. If they go this, so this all develops over time, right? You know, you weren't around 35 years ago when all this stuff was kind of kicking off. I promise you, it just changes over time. It's the same story. But the key is to recognise that just because it's old doesn't mean it's right. Yeah? It could still be nonsense just because it's been around for a bit. Look at Christianity. Right? So, always come back to yourself. Always try and think about understanding energy. That's the game. That's where the action is, and that's where Reiki is so good. And if you're going to take a Reiki course, do it with some mindfulness, if you can.
Choose the most empowering.
Choose the most empowering.
Action.
Yes, do that.
That's what I say. Choose what feels most empowering, and now you've been armed with all of this information. You can't forget it. It's there. So it's up to you what you do.
Yeah.
But as I say, if you want to develop yourself and really understand who you are and the nature of reality and really explore, then you have to decide, am I going to go into other people's beliefs and ideas, or am I going to...
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're still in that state of awakeness and alertness where you can still bring in some information into your brain. My name is Joules. I'm going to be talking about hypnotherapy and neurological reprogramming and how to consciously change your thoughts, beliefs to help you live a more liberated life. So my Reiki journey began back in about 2013. And prior to that, my journey to kind of, I like to say remembering who I am. I don't really like to say the word awakening, but remembering who I really am kind of started when I got into Buddhism. And I was kind of sitting on retreats and doing all this like 10 hours of meditation and suddenly realised that I was not this physical body that I thought I was for 25 years of my life, and suddenly went, who am I? And then what happened then was just a magical journey of delving into different areas of spiritual healing, because I went into a period of therapy for about a year, and I sort of started to recognise how my conditioning and my experiences of childhood were quite impactful in terms of how I perceive the world. My central nervous system was a little bit shot. So I just, rather than go to the doctors and seek psychiatric help, which is what I was told to do quite by a lot of my family, I just decided, no, I'm going to do yoga and I'm going to find my Zen. So that's what I did. And it created this magical journey of going beyond this perception of Joules, this perception of this character as to who I thought I was. So I ended up studying psychology, went into a psychiatric hospital, but I was also very drawn to supporting people's healing journey, whatever that looked like. And I didn't realise it at the time that I'm quite an empathic character, kind of pick up on things from other people, picking up on the energy is sort of Claire and has kind of spoken about, pick up on energies quite quickly. It used to send me into a bit of tears, but now I can handle it now, which is fine. And I got into Reiki as a form of healing modality just for myself. I wanted some sort of process or some sort of structure to what I was doing, because all these things were happening with my hands, all these things were happening in the body, and I didn't fully understand it. So I got into that as a structure, but I sort of still do healing, but I don't call it Reiki healing anymore. It's I'm kind of using the term quantum healing, which feels more descriptive of where I am at in my journey right now, in terms of this character as Joules. And quantum healing really is about just finding that 0 point. Come on in. In quantum healing, you're kind of coming back to that 0 point, you're coming back to that sort of source of creation of infinite possibilities, where there is an opportunity to experience polarity, there is an opportunity to experience duality, which is what we've come here to do, by the way, in my understanding of the human experience, is to experience all of these things that we experience. We can either choose this life, but it's a conscious choice in terms of what Claire has also mentioned. It's a conscious choice what we come here to experience. So once we realise that we're making those conscious or unconscious choices, in some cases, in terms of my own experiences, quite a few unconscious choices in terms of the experiences I've had, but just bringing the conscious choice into awareness so that we can kind of create this space and have the fun, as Claire said, in the playground. My hypnotherapy journey began this year. It was a synchronistic kind of thing. It just landed in my lap, and I just thought, why not? I'll just see where this goes. And it's been a fantastic, amazing way of understanding a little bit more about the neuroscience, which is kind of what I was involved in psychology a few years ago when I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and just also a little bit more understanding of how these brains are kind of functioning. And yes, we're all connected to this consciousness field, we're all in it, we are it, and how a lot of the thoughts that we have can be ours, but it's also ours as a collective. It's also ours as aspects of source. So it's just understanding that, and understanding that sometimes when we kind of get onto this journey of meditation and we can sit for some time, and all these thoughts can kind of bypass and we can kind of not get attached to them, they kind of got to come from somewhere, and some of them sort of stay with us for a period of time. So we might have certain belief systems about who we are in terms of how we relate to people from childhood. If we've had traumatic experiences, we might relate to people in relationships a certain way because of how we've learned to get love, or how we believe that we need to be in order to receive love. So hypnotherapy is really a way of just getting to the root of that, I feel. Not just about this life, but also other lives in the past, present, and future, all in the now. In my experience, it's all in the now anyway. So hypnotherapy is a really beautiful modality to get to the root of some of these systems that are in operation within us, that we've either chosen to experience or that we've just allowed our brain to kind of take over. So, for example, in terms of how I would relate to people in my relationships is very much intrinsically connected to how I used to relate to my relationships with my mother and my father, and I can see that now. So changing the programs that are running, changing the milk bottle collection that's going on. But yeah, thank you ladies. Changing the way that we view things, becoming aware of how we view things, becoming aware of any potential programs that maybe are running throughout our system, becoming aware of any programs that we may have instilled based on how we've needed to survive from childhood, just becoming aware of all of that and recognising, do I want this to be part of my current experience as an adult now? Is this how I want to continue to perceive my reality? And just becoming aware of it and changing that is something that we can do in hypnotherapy. So has anybody come across hypnotherapy before? Quite a few people. So other than what I've just described, do you have an understanding of what it might be? Do you have an understanding of what the process is and what actually happens? Because if not, I can just explain that briefly.
Yeah, I can explain that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So in hypnotherapy, it's about, and I don't proclaim myself as a healer, I just want to say that, but, you know, like I'm there to guide and support the person's own natural healing ability, just to make that really, really clear. So in a hypnotherapy session, you would potentially be sitting there in a very, very comfortable space. We would have gone through some things that you want to look at, some areas of thoughts that you want to look at, behaviours, perhaps if you've got an aversion to going to the gym like me, or if you've got a love of eating like me, you might want to kind of address some of those things if it's out of control. So we would go into a very, very relaxed space. I would talk you through a process of just coming into this space, a bit like what Claire did in terms of just becoming present now and just allowing your brain to change out of the frequency that it's in. Because there's there's five, but there's four main frequencies, which is beta, alpha, theta and delta. And now I hope you're still in that beta state of alertness, you're awake and you can still hear what's going on. But hypnotherapy is kind of between that alpha and theta state, which is that sort of dream, like, you know, you're just drifting off to sleep, or you're just kind of waking up.
My name is Liz Boulter, and first of all, I just want to say thank you to Lydia for setting this up. I was so excited when she first let me know that she was, interestingly, it was in the same week that I decided I was going to start telling people a lot about my experiences and becoming a little bit more public. And then Lydia contacted me and said, I'm going to do this event. And I thought, ooh, shall I? There was this real trepidation, but I knew I wanted to do it, had to do it. So so thank you. And thank you for being here, because obviously there's no point in getting to know me. And just this opportunity to be able to share my journey and share my story. And as I said, I've done public speaking before, but it's generally been about the type of things that I've done in the past, which were reflexology, Reiki, stuff like that. And that has been where I've kind of spoken publicly. But this is my first time speaking publicly about things like aliens, UFOs and Sasquatch, which are a little bit kind of less mainstream than probably a lot of things that people, even in the spiritual world, tend to talk about. For many years, I'll tell you my whole kind of story, my background in a moment, but kind of even in sort of what we would call spiritual worlds, and I have to, I hate the word spiritual, but I can't find another word for it, so I do that more, because I don't like it. But you know what I mean. So in the kind of spiritual world, even there, it's okay to kind of talk about, your old Aunt Beryl comes through and talks to you and, you kind of try all these different things. But when you start talking about aliens and UFOs and that you had a little ride in a UFO and things like that, people do kind of go, okie dokie, and then you realise, like, do I carry on talking or do I just kind of, let's talk about the weather for a moment, And so I've become quite cautious about, over the years, about who I tell what to. So this is quite new to kind of, I have no idea what you guys are going to think about what I say. But I've got to the point, I think, in my life where I feel it doesn't matter. And a lot of what, other people have spoken about today is that we're all on our own journey. We're all travelling through our own experiences, and somebody else's experience may not be your experience. But it's just kind of honouring that and kind of accepting that everybody is on their own path, everybody is journeying in the way that they need to go through. And so I feel kind of like perhaps now the point I'm at in my life is that there's less judgment maybe around people being able to accept what I'm going to say. So my background is, so I'm 54 years old now. But from a very young age, I had psychic abilities. what people would call psychic abilities. It wasn't accepted in my family. In fact, in part of my family, it was very kind of shut down. It was seen as being, not exactly witchcraft, but, you just don't talk about that sort of stuff, and, don't say it. So, from a very young age, even though I was knowing things that were kind of, I knew they were going to happen before they happened in our reality, I learned to not say anything. I learned to shut that down from a very early age, and seeing things, hearing things. Again, I learned to not really mention that. And perhaps as a young child, maybe I don't remember properly, but perhaps as a very young child, maybe I did mention it, but because I got shut down, I made the decision quite early to not discuss it. So I was kind of in a bit of a lonely world. I did share some things with my sister, who also has had experiences through her life as well. So I had a little bit of kind of comradeship at home in terms of being able to share some things. From a young age, what I used to do at night, just for a bit of fun, was I used to lie in my bed on my tummy, and I used to have the headboard, and I can see it now, it's kind of pinky kind of coloured headboard, and I used to pretend to turn a TV on, and I used to do this before the time of remote controls, turn the TV on, and I would see visions. Now these visions were not on the actual headboard. A lot of them were in my mind, but it was like they were kind of almost in my mind, but also I could see them in front of me at the same time. And I began to just enjoy playing. It was a game. It was light. It wasn't anything too heavy. I just enjoyed doing that in the evening. And what I started realising that I could do was I could predict what was going to be on the front of the newspapers. My mum and dad, this would have been back in the kind of late 70s, 80s, would always get the Daily Mirror and the Sun. I don't know why I used to get two papers, but they used to get two papers. And I would be able to predict what was going to be on the papers, what the headlines were. Now I was quite young, so I wasn't exactly watching the news, current affairs had no interest for me. And a lot of the things that I was able to predict were things like, a celebrity had died, someone had got divorced, the things that I wouldn't have known beforehand. But I didn't say anything, I didn't share it, I just enjoyed playing this game. As time went on, I began to not need the headboard anymore, and I would just have these flashes of visions. So I could literally just be doing anything, going about playing with my friends, just kind of, I used to do a lot of drawing, colouring as a young child, and then suddenly I would get a flash of something that was going to happen. Often to do with family or friends. And also very, very strong sense of intuition. And I think we'll come back to this in a moment, but intuition is something that I'm sure every single person here has experienced and is aware of. And I think in our society at the moment, we don't honour that level of intuition that we all have enough. And I think it's something that if you choose to, developing that intuition in yourself can be the most powerful thing that you can ever do in your life, is to actually really developing that part of yourself. And very similar to, again, to sort of the other talks that happened today so far, is that everything comes from here, everything comes from you, everything comes from who you are. Yes, throughout my life, I've done lots of courses, I've worked with different people, I have channeled various different energies or entities, but at the end of the day, this is what's the most important thing. And it's not ever giving that power away, as I think Dave and Claire said so well, was not giving that power away to anything else. And if you do offer your power to someone else, in that you are wanting to get some more information, you're wanting advice, just being as discerning as possible about that, and making sure that you're making your judgments by going back into your own level of trust. And that goes with what I'm going to say today. So, you know, you may not resonate with anything I say, you may resonate with some of it, you may think, yeah, okay, not sure about that, that doesn't really kind of gel with me. It's important that you focus on the things that do resonate with you. And for me, that's been the most important part of my path. Certainly listen to today's talk about Reiki. I did Reiki up to the Reiki master level back in 2000, I think I started that. And I was a bit of an annoying Reiki student because I kept saying, you know, they'd say put your hands like this, and I'd say, well, it feels better for me to put my hands like that, and I feel like I need to put my hands here, and they were like, well, no, in the manuals it says to put your hand there. And so yeah, it was probably quite annoying for the teachers because I wanted to go with what was my intuition, and that has partly been my journey, is to really, really focus on my intuition, what feels right for me, my gut feelings. So I travelled this journey through my childhood. There were certain things that happened, you know. One story that comes up for me was when I'd come back in from school. I think I was about 14 years old, and I was just about to get out of my school uniform and change, and just this really strong voice. And again, I'll talk more about the voices later. Some voices sound like other people's voices that come to me, but a lot of the time I've realised it's actually my voice. It's my voice that is coming to me and telling me that something is about to happen. So I'd arrived home, just about to get changed, and this voice, this really strong voice in me, just said, "No, you're going to go out in a couple of minutes. Stay. You know, you need to be ready to go." No sooner had that happened that the phone rang, and that my mum had been involved in a mugging. Sadly, she was fine, but she was in hospital, and that I needed to go and see her. And quickly sort of hop out and get on a bus to go and see her. And so those kind of things I know happen to a lot of people. You know, you get a feeling, you think about somebody, and then the phone rings, or you think about someone and then you bump into them, you haven't seen them for a long time. Those are the kind of things that happen to everybody all the time. I don't think there's many people that could turn around and say that's never happened to them in their lives. I chose to develop those intuitions, and also that level of kind of what people would call being psychic. So, for instance, in that story with my mum, that situation had already happened with my mum. She had already been mugged. Someone was just about to make the phone call, so it had already happened. So was I tuning in? And these are questions I ask myself. I don't know all the answers. You know, there's still things I'm kind of trying to think, well, why? How did that happen? Was I just tuning in because I was close to my mum? And when you have any close relationships, we can have those relationships whether we are in the same physical space or not. And telepathy is something that I'm really passionate about. And you know, I think it's something that everybody has. I think every single person has the ability to have a telepathic relationship if they choose to have that. There have been a lot of other incidences in my life where I haven't known, or the incident hasn't already happened. So sometimes it's that things are going to happen in what we would call the future. The whole thing about, again, I think Dave and Claire kind of touched on it briefly, to do with what we call past, present, and future. They are all, again, they're concepts. And that idea that those things don't actually have to exist in that order came to me. I was travelling in India when I was about 26 years old, and I was reading loads of books, and one of the books, which is called The Mind of God, and it isn't about God in the religious sense, but it's about taking apart, there's a lot of physics in it, and it's about taking apart concepts of past, present, and future. And so, in terms of people saying, you know, we can time travel, I believe we can time travel, because actually there is no travelling to happen. Those things, those past, present and future, potentially are happening as we speak. They're all happening. And so that's why people like myself can have these flashes, these images of things that haven't already happened. We haven't already allowed them to come into our consciousness, into our energy field. And so it also works the other way with being able to manifest. So we manifest and we can attract in what we choose to have in our lives. So through my life, so I started as a teenager, different people would come through to me. So I remember one time I suddenly was lying in bed and my leg started really hurting. My right leg was really painful, and I suddenly had this flash of this woman, and she said, Harriet. I had no idea who she was, but I had a sense that she was family. I spoke to my dad and I said, was there anyone called Harriet in our family? And he said, yes, that was your nan's sister. And I said, all right. And he said, yeah, she always walked with a stick. She had a bad leg. I was like, which leg? It was her right leg. Yeah, she was always in a lot of pain. So I began a kind of relationship with Harriet and began chatting to her, and kind of it was something profound that came through. It was very much kind of just, hello, I'm part of your family, and those kind of things. But again, it kind of opened up a bit of the world for me. I didn't say too much to my family. I just kept it to myself. But more and more family members that have passed away began to come through. And I began with my friends to work on this book. I inherited this book from my grandma. It's called Fortune Telling for Fun and Popularity. And this was given to her in 1953. Now my nan, this is my maternal nan, she was not into psychic stuff at all. In fact, she was quite religious. Although I think she was probably more religious in the terms of going to church was, what we did back then. You could dress up and kind of, have a Sunday sermon. But this book, somehow she received it, and then I received it. And so as a teenager, this book became like a little Bible for me. And it has loads and loads of little kind of exercises to do in it. And they're to do with predicting the future and telepathy and palmistry and all this kind of stuff. And I just loved it. And me and my friends used to just kind of, usually about which boy I fancied or that kind of thing, And it was kind of like asking all these questions. And it was fun. It was fun. We kind of did, we did kind of hook into the answers and kind of hand over our power in some ways to this book. But as young people, we kept it fun. We kept it light. And I think for me that has been, again, a massive lesson, and something that when I'm supporting people on their spiritual journey is to keep it light. If you start kind of like getting too heavy about your development, you block your own energy. Because when we're light, our energy is light. Our energy is kind of flowing, and we can receive, and we can understand, and we can kind of move forward on our own paths. As soon as we start getting too kind of serious about it, we do block our own energy. And that's why children are great. Even things, like, let's say, crystals, things like that, working with those, a child will pick up a crystal and just have fun with it. A child will just have fun with knowing that they can guess certain things. There's not a general heaviness about it. And so for me, on my journey, that's been really important, to keep it as light as possible. And just kind of have fun with your journey. It doesn't have to be this massive, heavy, trolling through lots of, serious books and heaviness. It doesn't have to be that. One thing I started doing, again, as a kind of teenager, probably late teens, was I used to try and guess what someone was going to wear before I met them. So if I was meeting a friend, I'd be like, right, I'm going to guess. Now, okay, part of me was obviously guessing within what I knew about that person, but I would try and guess like what colour, what's going to be the colour they're going to wear. So, you know, I'd be meeting a friend, I'd be thinking that, and I'd suddenly get a flash of red, and I think, well, she's going to be wearing red. Okay, so that's what she's going to be wearing. I'd turn up, she's wearing red trousers. And this was something, again, it was just playful, it was just supporting me to develop, without almost even knowing, I was just having fun, developing my, my natural abilities, which we all have. My dad is a little bit more open to this kind of stuff, and so we began to do some practicing of telepathy. We used to sit together, and one of us used to draw a picture on a piece of paper, and then the other one would have to, you know, or you'd think of something and the other one would have to draw it. And every time, it was almost like, you know, out of, say, let's five attempts, 4 would always be right. So, and actually telepathy is something that has been studied a lot. If in the whole kind of spiritual world, looking at things in a scientific way, telepathy is one of the areas that's been looked at the most. Possibly because it's easier to study. It's you know, you can do practical exercises like that. So it's not about how someone feels. It's about a very practical thing. I'm thinking this. You're going to receive that message. And so there is a lot. You know, again, you can look online. You just type in telepathy studies, and there are different universities that are continually doing studies on the power of telepathy, and they all come out that it's true, that we do have the power of telepathy. And these are scientific studies that have, you know, they've gone through the whole rigmarole of making very controlled experiments with people, and they found that it does happen. It does happen. People do have telepathic experiences. And I know I have that with my children, which sometimes can be a bit annoying because you're trying to think of something that you don't want them to know, and then they go and clock it. But, you know, we all have that, and we have that with our loved ones, we have that with our friends and families, and again, it's, do you want to develop that? You know, again, talking earlier about this responsibility, this self-responsibility. If we could all hear what each other was saying, what would be different? How would that affect us? Would that be good, or would that be quite tricky? You know, do we want our minds to be fully open to other people? Do we want to, or are we? Is it actually better that some of our thoughts are kept in our own minds? But you can choose. You know, again, you can choose to develop those things with a friend, with somebody that you trust. You know, doing very simple exercises, just, as I say, just thinking of something and the other person has to, you know, think of it or draw it. There are also ESP cards, cards that kind of, so someone will pick one of the cards and the other person has to try and guess what they've got. So these were all exercises that I just began doing myself. I began working with pendulums. When I first began working with pendulums was, again, probably late teens. I thought the pendulum had the answer, you know, which is what a lot of people think. I was like, yes, this has got the answer. Should I do this? Should I go there? What job shall I take? Which, you know, what shall I have for breakfast? And it literally was me handing over what I was feeling like this pendulum is going to be, you know, giving me answers to everything. I never have to ever think anything again and make any decisions again. Obviously, what I've learned over time and what's really important is that it's me that is supporting that pendulum to move in a you know, different direction. And I don't mean that I'm deliberately making it move, yes, that way or no, that way. But that there is a conscious connection between me and that pendulum. And so pendulums are great to use, again, for development, for psychic development. They are also good for supporting you to find out what you really want. Because if you get a yes when you actually wanted a no, or vice versa, that tells you something. That tells you something. Well, actually, no, I didn't want that. I wanted this. So I often say to people, you know, it's more about what was your first feeling when that pendulum went in one direction or the other. Or I will ask someone if they're trying to make a decision to put various choices down, turn them over, mix them up, and then you pick one at random. What's your gut feeling? Because your gut feeling is really important. It's not, right, I'm going to pick that one, that's the one I'm going to have to do. It's what is your gut feeling when you pick that at random. And this is the same as well when someone is channeling. Someone could come through and offer you advice. If that doesn't feel right to you, don't take it. No, if you wouldn't take advice from everybody, if you ask a particular question to anybody, whether it's in your family or friends, you might respect those people, but you don't necessarily have to do what they tell you to do. And it's really important to know that you have that choice. And so I think having choice and knowing that you have that responsibility of your own choice is really important in any developmental path. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, so I'm going to make sure. Okay. Right, my visions. So I've had a lot of visions over many, many years of things that seem as though they're in the future. One of the most profound ones, but probably because of who she was, that really sticks in my mind and in my heart, was of Princess Diana. And at the time I was living in a little bedsit in London, didn't have a TV, I had a radio, and I used to go for evening walks. I was not far from Hampstead Heath, I used to go for evening walks. Came home, lay on the bed, and just immediately, and this was something I was fairly used to by then, I was in my late 20s, something at that point, all of a sudden, again it was my voice, but I didn't necessarily recognise it as my voice at the time, but just when someone incredibly famous is going to die and you'll hear about it tomorrow. And it was like, so famous. So I sort of lay there and I thought, well, who is this person going to be? And I was trying to ask questions. The only other information that I could get was this person was in their 30s, but they were world famous. It was going to bring, and it was the feeling that I got, was that this was going to bring universal grief. This was going to bring, a state of mourning to everybody. And I just lie there and I was thinking, who on earth is this going to be? Someone that's world famous, they're in their 30s, didn't know if it was male or female. And the only person I could think of at that time was thinking, is it Michael Jackson? He's in his 30s, he's very famous. Eventually I just went to bed, went to sleep, thought, okay, forget about it, I'm not getting any more information. Woke up in the morning and turned my radio on, and they were talking about the death of Diana. Didn't click with me straight away. Initially I just thought, we're talking about a play, is it a play that's going to be on or something, or show or something? And then of course they started talking more, and as I began to kind of wake up properly, I realised this is it. And then they started talking about this state of mourning, that there was this kind of mass grief happening. And I remember just sitting there, and then I just burst into tears. And obviously there was this mass mourning. So again, that made me sort of question, well, how did I know? She wasn't dead at that point when I got the information. This was what we call future. But somehow this thing we call future had seeped into now, and I was able to know that this was going to happen. And this happens all the time to me. And I think part of it is because I have chosen to develop it. For a lot of people that would be maybe something they don't want to develop. Again, you can make a choice. Maybe you don't want to know what's going to happen. Maybe there are multiple futures, but maybe sometimes we can pull in one. There's many different, obviously, theories as to how that can happen. One kind of a bit more light-hearted one that happened recently was we'd stopped doing at home. I'd stopped doing online shopping for a while, and then I suddenly said, I think I'll get an Ocado shop. I need a lot of stuff. Let's get an Ocado shop. And my kids sort of remembered how when we used to get Mercado shops a few years ago, we'd always try and guess what, because they always text you and tell you, you know, it's going to be a certain person and give it a name, and they'll tell you what van it's in, and the van usually has fruit or veg on it. So, you know, you could have, you know, Lee in the onion van or something like that. And so we were like, yeah, okay, let's have a guess. So one of my sons, both of my sons are quite psychic, but one of them particularly, and he kind of looked at me and he said, Mummy, what do you think? What do you think it's going to be? And I immediately just saw the name Harry. And I often get my visions, say I'm auditory, so I hear visions, but I also see, and I see names a lot of the time. So the name Harry just flashed in front of me. So I was just like, it's going to be Harry. And he went, okay, Mummy, and what van? And immediately I saw red fruit. Couldn't work out what it was, but it was red, and I heard the words red fruit. So I said, well, it's going to be Harry and it's a red fruit van. And so my son said, well, raspberries. So it's okay, it's going to be Harry in the raspberry van. An hour later, I get a text through, your delivery today will be by Harry in the raspberry van. So this young guy turns up, and I'm like, we knew it was going to be you. I'm just going to say it. We knew it was going to be you, Harry in the raspberry van. And he's like, how did you know that? And I said, well, I'm kind of psychic, so, you know, we sort of play this game and, you know, we knew it was you. Out of all the names that we could have picked in the world and all the different bands we could have picked, you know, we've got it. And he said, wow, he said, I'm really interested in the whole psychic thing. And he said, I'm thinking of training to do Reiki. And he was only a young guy, probably 22, something like that. And he was like, but I'm feeling like, you know, none of my friends are into it, and I don't know, alienated from my friends. And we ended up standing on, bless it, probably late for all these other deliveries, but we ended up standing on the doorstep and chatting for about 20 minutes about his spiritual path and you know, Reiki or whatever, you know, other kind of avenues that he could take. And so it felt really important that I knew that it was Harry in the raspberry van. So it wasn't just like, okay, we've guessed it. The end. It actually felt like I needed to tell him, and I needed to tell him for a reason, because this guy was on the cusp of not knowing whether he should go down a particular path or not. Never seen him again. So I'm hoping that he, you know, followed the path he chose. And so those are things that happen to me all the time. And as I say, I do believe that this is something that can happen to everybody. I don't think I'm special in any shape or form. I think this is something that everyone can be open to if you choose. It's not always an easy path, you know, and I will say that. Sometimes it's a hard path, and sometimes you feel very separate to this physical reality that we're in. And sometimes you do know things that are going to happen that you don't want to happen, and you're thinking, I don't want that to happen. I don't want that particular thing. Obviously, usually someone dying or someone becoming ill. You know, you feel like, I don't want that to happen. But if that doesn't leave my mind, then I know. It's like I try really hard to kind of go, well, I'm going to change that. And sometimes I have been able to, or we have been able to, because obviously it's not just me doing it. Yeah, so my visions are continual, they just happen all the time, travelling in and out of past, present and future. And my psychic abilities have just grown over the years, just grown and grown and grown, and I now am able to very much tap into people's ancestors. So not just, you know, people that have passed away that they might have known, or that, you know, were kind of like not too many generations back, but something that I'm really, really passionate about is our ancestral stories that have come through, and each of us have ancestors, and we're all connected. You know, there's not that many ancestors that separate us from each other. So no matter where we're from in the world, we're connected. We are connected. And so I will often get people's ancestors coming through, and as I'm talking about this, of course, immediately I am, and I knew this would happen. I meant to say at the beginning, if I suddenly go a bit, like, look a bit phased out, it's because I'm actually hearing things coming through. Yeah, okay, so the ancestors, and I felt this actually while I was sitting there, and it was during was during the demonstration of hypnotherapy, because I was getting a bit kind of going down into my own kind of meditative state. I started thinking, ooh, yeah, I'm not alone. This is quite packed, actually, and there's lots of people here. And I partly see them, and I sometimes see them as in what feels like with my eyes. I sometimes see them in my mind, and I sometimes just know. You know, when you walk into a room and you just think, there's someone here. I know there's someone here. It's just a feeling. Scientific experiments can't judge that feeling. That's why I think things like telepathy have been studied a lot, but not necessarily a whole kind of psychic phenomenon. So I've got lots of ancestors. So they are probably all yours. I'm not feeling any of mine at the moment, which is wonderful. Oh. And my body, as I'm kind of feeling stuff, I often get, this is where I get, and I get all twitchy, because it's like, and sometimes my throat will start going and my voice will change. I don't get taken over. You know, I will be a voice and I will be a channel, but I don't necessarily get taken over, because I'm still me. I'm still me, and I'm very much in control of being me. And I have what some people might term as gatekeepers or spirit guides that support me as well. Just a quick thing about kind of protection, because obviously a lot of people say, well, I can't do this because I don't feel protected, I don't feel safe. Anyone can come through and can take me over. There are things that, you know, people do. You know, you focus on protecting yourself, you maybe put yourself in a bubble. A lot of people use colours, people do use crystals, they use all sorts of things. Again, it is very much about your mindset. If I feel I'm strong and I'm connected and I'm safe and I'm protected, then that's it. That's the bottom line. In the same way as if someone knocks on my door at home, I'm going to choose whether to open that door, and that's what I tend to always do, look through the window first, and then I make a decision. So I do that. You know, I sensing, like, in terms of now, me sensing, and there's somebody on horseback, but here, someone on the big horse, a dappled horse. Very close. But I'm feeling safe because I'm doing a scan. As I'm talking to you, I'm also able to separate myself and do a scan to know that I'm happy to have any of these energies in this space. And if I wasn't, they would go. And I'm quite strict at that. It's like, no, you're not staying. Get out of here. And again, it's about that mindset of knowing that you are the one that's in charge. No, you're the one that's in charge. And if you're not feeling comfortable in the same way that you wouldn't open your door and let someone in, if you didn't feel that you felt comfortable with that person coming in, you would hopefully shut your door or certainly do something to stop that person from coming in. And it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. But that has taken me a long time to get to that point of strength now. So I would say anybody that is wanting to develop that side of themselves, then yes, have support from somebody who knows what they're doing. That's not disempowering you, because again, you do have that power to do it. But if you're feeling a bit vulnerable, then like in any job, you know, if you or anything, if you were learning to swim, you'd have someone support you, you know, to be able to swim. It's having someone just to offer you that support. And I think it is important, and I've certainly had a lot of support over the years. I've been really lucky to work with a lot of amazing people and have that guidance and have that support, as well as developing things on my own. And I don't know who this person is on the horse, but I feel like at some point I'm going to have to ask. Yeah, so psychic stuff, talking to ghosts, talking to dead people, as my kids like to call them. Mummy talks to dead people. And they do as well. So, and I have to say with my children, I haven't kind of pushed that, I haven't encouraged it in any way. It's just something that's been kind of part of their development as well. But then I've got opportunity things. So moving then into something that seems a little more way out. And I will get to you at some point. I'm really fit, it's almost like on my back now, going, talk to me. Quick talk about aliens and so, yeah, my first, so has anyone heard of Sasquatch? Is that something that, yeah, okay. I'll explain it because the kind of other word potentially for Sasquatch is Bigfoot. The Sasquatch people themselves don't particularly like the word Bigfoot, and obviously over the years there's been this kind of hunt for Bigfoot. Sadly, even now, if I tap into Google, if I tap Sasquatch into Google, you'll often come up with these kind of hunt sites where people are wanting, they're out there with their guns and they're out there in the forests and they're out there looking to find what they call Bigfoot and shoot and bring it home, which makes me feel very upset because these are people like us. They're just people that choose to be interdimensional and they choose to not always be seen. We can choose to do that as well, but we generally as humans we've chosen to be in our physical bodies and we've chosen to be seen. Somebody just sent me something about a program. It was really random. Again, these things happen. I love and hate Facebook, but Facebook has actually brought me a few friends from around the world that have shared things with me that have propelled my development. And someone sent me just this video of this guy who had said that he knew he met the Sasquatch family in America, and that he had befriended them, and so obviously Sasquatch potentially look like apes, but they're not. They're people, and they have families and family settings, and they are very not all of them, but a bit like us. Majority are kind, caring, and spiritual people. And so I was sent this to follow, hopefully I can. What I will say though is that everybody else has said as well, is that we are all unique, and so anything I say that doesn't resonate with you, just kind of throw it away, just forget about it, right? If it does resonate with you, you may wish to explore it more, whether that's with me or some of the other people that have been here today or someone else. The other thing I've noticed is if something really, can I say this, pisses me off, if something really pisses me off, right, or really like annoys me, and it's like, oh for God's sake, that's ridiculous, which I got when I first had an introduction to angels many years ago. I thought they were rather pathetic, these wing things. I thought, oh for God's sake. And it was a really strong reaction, right? So when I kept getting this after about the third time, I was like, you might want to look at that. You're having a bit of a strong reaction, and all it is an image of an angel. So I did, and I found a lot of expanded awareness or expanded consciousness within me when I did that. So I would say, if it doesn't resonate with you, leave it. If it does, you might want to explore it. If it really annoys you, I think explore that one as well, because that can be really good. However you're kind of guided to do that, which might be asking friends, talking to somebody else, going on our lovely God Google, or whatever it might be. So I want to talk today about my understanding and where I've come to here, my understanding of the reality of our existence or your existence. And hopefully the tech will work. It is working, that's good. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about me, not too much, just so you know why I'm going to be sitting here. I want to talk about where we are now in terms of that we are going through, and I'm sure most of you know this, a massive leap, as people love to say, in human consciousness, in our growth, our evolution and ascension. And the people that have been on before haven't talked about that and their experiences and what they're being guided to look at for themselves and to assist anybody else that it resonates with. So I want to talk about that. This is a little thing, I've just called it the art of being, just as
a word or a description to use about my understanding of who we are as individuals. What can be challenging? We've heard some of that already. And really talking about how awareness, being aware of what's happening to us in any given moment, in any now moment, is the key, which I have to say is one that I will continue to work on, probably till I pass from this physical body, because when I, just as you were saying, just when you think you're aware, there's another Russian doll. One of my clients coined it lovely as the eternal onion. So I thought, well, that's quite a good one. It's like there's just another layer. But another thing to mention is there's only another layer if we so choose to explore that. So your name's just called me, sorry, Liz. So Liz is talking about how all these amazing things happened to her over a period of time, but they wouldn't have happened if you weren't able to deal with them with that. So it's like only things that will happen to us and our expansion in consciousness will only happen if it's something that we are comfortable with on whatever level that is. Triggers, oh yeah, we've got quite a few of those, a whole host of different things. And this is what I want us to get into. I'll put 5 simple practices. We're actually probably going to do 6 or 7 different things that you can try. And if we get time, we'll have a look and see. If we get time to do like a more kind of formal meditation, we'll see. Okay. So this is the main thing that happened to me. When I was 2 months old, I actually nearly died. I was in hospital for a couple of weeks. I had asthma and bronchitis. And at the time, very similar to what's been happening in the last 2 years, mothers were not allowed to be with their children, which, they'd go to hospital. My mum was allowed to see me for half an hour. And at that time, because I've done a lot of regression, if that's even the right word, gone back to that time, I actually shut down all my emotions. I didn't know it, I just closed all my emotions down, thought it wasn't safe. Apparently my mum has told me that all the hair at the back of my head got worn away because I cried so much, because it's like I'd been abandoned. That was as this little divine little being of 2 months old, that was my interpretation. And from that point on, I hardly ever cried. I just thought I was in a very male-dominated job. I was working in corporate sales, and I just thought, oh, I'm like a man, I don't cry, and that's how it is. And then until that fatal time in 1998, I had quite a severe back injury where I couldn't sit or... so basically, sitting, driving, my job was driving and sitting with clients. Within a couple of minutes I'd be in pain, quite severe pain, that would then last until I laid down or possibly went for a walk. That helped a bit. And I tried everything when I had this severe pain. I went to the doctors, needed to it's your age, have some painkillers, bless him. Another doctor did give me some acupuncture, that helped a little bit. I had osteopathy, I had chiropractic, I had massage, you name it, I tried it, and nothing really, the acupuncture helped a little bit, but nothing really got rid of this pain until I was having my nails done, and the woman said, why don't you go and have some Reiki? And I said, oh, what's that? She said, I don't really know, they sort of put their hands on you and it does something. So that's how I went along with that belief. And after the first session, my pain started to subside, and I was like, wow, this is something happening here. And over a 3-month period, the pain completely went. With the pain going, tears started to come. And I was like, what's going on here? I don't cry, why am I crying? So then I'm trying to analyse where the tears are coming from, not understanding what's going on, that I'm connecting to this emotional part of me that's been closed. She then said, well, you too can learn to do Reiki, whatever that was. And I thought, yeah, this feels very, I feel very in resonance with this. It's helped me so much. I don't understand what happened, but I know it helped me. I know I'm not in pain now, and I've got these feelings, and that's a bit kind of weird, but so I went on to do Reiki, and I knew the first session that I did that I would actually go on to teach it. And I have to say, for me, that was kind of a key opener for me, a door opener to open up all these. And this morning they talked about it being inner senses, inner or extra senses, where we get these extra senses of perception, if you like. And what happened is it just started to expand for me. And then I wanted to try and learn different things. And so, as I said this morning, it's not something that's outside of you, but what I believe, like what everybody's talked about, is that there are all these tools and techniques, if you like, or keys that can help us unlock and connect to this eternal part of us, if you like, or the soul or spirit or whatever you want to call it. So that's what I started to do, and boy did I do it. And I think probably most of you are probably somewhere on that path of like, oh, that's interesting, what's that? Like a bit like a kid in a candy shop. So yeah, I went on to practice it. And what happened when I first started doing it, I didn't have a lot of confidence. So when I first started sort of doing Reiki, I was like, I don't know if this is working, I can't really feel it. So I went to volunteer at an animal sanctuary. And for me, that was a big, massive opener, because they didn't know what was happening. I wasn't saying, I might put my hands on you or off you, and this might happen. They just were. And these animals just started to get healed. It was, for those of you that know, I was for about 14 years at Wood Green and the Cats Protection around here, which I still work with. And they were just having these amazing healings. So if they had behavioural issues or if they had physical issues, it was starting to have this massive transformation. And I was like, well, something's happening. I don't know what's happening, but something's happening. And so that for me was just the, like, okay, I don't need to understand what it is here. There's something magical going on here. And actually, the people that I was there with, I was just volunteering there, and they said, can we do what you do? We want to help the animals. And so they then went to their directors and said, can she please come along and teach us? So it was just amazing. So I did that for quite a long time. So I just wanted to sort of kind of share that, because for me it wasn't about a person saying, I don't know if I believe this or not, or this is my belief system, or it was just energy and it was working. It was. Like a lot of people, I've kind of moved on. The Russian doll, as you beautifully put, expands, and we try new things, just like all of you will be with different things. So about 15 years ago, I was kind of guided to work with other tools such as sound. I know some of you mentioned sound baths, but also to work with more symbols, and I started channeling and getting symbols that were not the Reiki symbols, other symbols. And this is so I got those, and then I was guided to create an album and those things. The only point of saying what I did here is that what I found is all these different things, as I'm sure all of you could list the different things that you've looked at, they all, for me, are just helping expanding my awareness and expanding my consciousness. And I feel that there isn't one thing. There's one thing that we might be like helping or supporting ourselves and people with now, but over the years, and I still use or have support on those aspects from other people as well. And a point, I'm just going to go off on a slight tangent here, because it was when other people were speaking about the interconnectedness. Is anybody here a massive Avatar fan?
Can't wait for the second one tonight.
Has anyone seen Avatar? Yeah, okay. So in Avatar, they talk about, what was the tree called? Awa, was it Awa? So Awa was a tree that like connected everything. Well, what you may or may not be aware of is that they, in the last few years, have actually discovered that trees have an interconnectedness and communicate all over the world. So, like, if we're ever in any doubt, science is starting to catch up with what we're kind of feeling and connecting to. So that's why I feel none of us are an island, none of us are on our own, and all through my life, I will continue to have support from others. And the more I tune into it, the more I realise what that can mean in whichever form. So, if you're getting an intuition that says, oh, I feel like this could be helpful to me, whatever it is, follow it through. It might just be a thought, or you might just bumped into someone and they just had a massage, and I feel that could be, go and have a massage. Or if you've seen something on TV, or you've just, for example, a beautiful demonstration of the man on his horse, where you might be guided to then start going to spiritualist churches, or connecting with some of the people here and say, actually, I am going to have that reading. If that's tuning in for you, then do it. Follow it through, because this is like how we teach ourselves and remember about our learning, and how we expand, because we start listening to these like sparks that we're getting. Oh yeah, and so then one of the things, this is one of my kind of latest things that I've been given is, I said I wanted to kind of bring back some of the technologies of the ancients, and I do. Some of you may think that Atlantis and places like that is mythical, but it is something that I do actually believe in my little space that existed somewhere. And they said that they had beds made of crystals that you would lie on. And as you may know, crystals are in every single device. So every computer, every phone, every radio, they used to have quartz watches or something they were called, weren't they? And the reason for that is because they have a quality which amplifies. So, and I know this morning Claire and David were talking about the fact that we have our own energy, but these tools can support us and help amplify things. So anyway, long story, but I got gifted these crystals, and I now have a crystal bed, and so all these magical things happen when I continue to look to be in alignment with what's feeling right, how I'm feeling, and being in tune. So it's like the more I practice, I don't know what it might be, cycling, driving, running, whatever it is, you don't get to be at the Olympics by just going out for a run or just doing a swim in the pool. It's the constant practice, and it's no different with any of these inner or extra senses, or this expansion of ourselves. So I went through a phase of publishing some articles in medical journals and things like that. So some of the previous speakers have talked about this. What is growth, evolution, and ascension? They're just different words for me, whichever one's floating your boat, are just about us expanding our conscious awareness of who we are. And we start to get things like heightened intuition, noticing things, knowing things. And we were talking earlier, weren't we, about, what was it, was it a dragon? No, what was the animal that you'd seen a couple of times?
A green woodpecker.
A green woodpecker, yeah. So where I live, there's a green woodpecker. Where you live, there isn't any, and then you'd seen two, like in succession, hadn't you? So usually for me, that's like, hey, I wondered what that could be. So if that was me, I might go and Google, green woodpecker, and there might be something on there that I then is some guidance for me. Or I might sit and meditate, and I might get the information, because we're all going to be different how we get it. So, telepathic communication, we talked about that before. So humans, animals, plants, again, my knowing and my belief is that we are all interconnected, and it's there. We're just learning and remembering to be on that frequency. And you all have experienced it to some degree. And it's a simple one. You go around your mum's or something, or you go around and someone just says, oh, I think the plants in the water, and you go and look and they're dry as a bone and you've forgotten to water them. And you haven't really looked at them. Something just kind of tells you. Go to your mum's and she looks after her plants brilliantly, and something kind of switches in. That's just a simple everyday one. Or deja vu, we're getting loads of that in a moment. And while people have been speaking today, the one thing I got, which was about as you were talking about the past, present and future. And again, it's something I've come to from my truth, is that time is not linear. We're living in linear time from day to day. It's actually all happening at once. And interestingly, these coincidences, I came across a real live example of this, and I remember it very well. It was 2003, and I was reading Seth books. So I can highly recommend that. Again, they're all coming up. Reading Seth book, and I'm reading a bit about time and how it's explaining about time. And we were in Cardiff, and I was working, and we were doing a presentation the next day. I remember to Cardiff ports, and we were all meeting, the bosses to discuss how we were going to do it. And I was waiting for them, and it was about 6:15. So I remember I said to my boss, when's the big boss coming? And he said, 7 o'clock. I went, okay, I'm going to have a drink then, and we'll have something to eat at 7 o'clock. So I'm sitting in the bar, got a drink, reading this about time's not linear. Now bearing in mind this is 2003, so what's that, nearly 20 years ago. Mobile phones weren't ones that you touched then, they were the original ones. Well, they weren't the great big brick things, but they were the ones that you had to physically touch the keyboard for it to move. And I didn't have a watch on me, I had my phone. I looked at my phone and it said 6:15, and I pop it in the bag, carry everything. It's a bit late, there's no clocks anywhere, and I'm like, I wonder what the time is. I get my phone out and it says 4 o'clock. And I'm like, how can the time say 4 o'clock? I haven't touched it, it's been in my bag. There's nothing. It wasn't even like, it could be British summer time, so it's gone back now. No, it was like totally out of sync. And I'm like, okay, this is a bit freaky here. So I go up to the bar and I said, can you tell me what the time is? And he said, yeah, it's just before 7 o'clock. So I'd obviously tuned in that it was the right time when people were coming. Also, this a mobile phone that cannot change had changed. And then that also happened twice when I was staying in hotel rooms, where I would often use on the TV, they would often have an alarm clock then, and I'd look at the alarm clock and it'd have the wrong time in it, and then I'd go and have a shower and I'd come back and the time's changed, and it's not changed to the current time, it's just changed. And I'm like, okay, I'm being shown here. So yeah, this is so often for me, the experiences I've had when I've read these books. It can be with anything, it can be with people, it can be with books. I'm reading this book about time, and then I get irrefutable evidence that time isn't linear. I can't explain it. There's no explanation for it. Another one, which isn't about time, but it's about energy, is, has anybody heard of Remy Peelok? Okay, so and they don't have many. Most of the research that's been done, as I'm sure most of you know, is being paid for by the big pharmaceutical companies. So obviously they want to research how good the pharmaceuticals can be for us. They're not going to research how we could actually be expanding and healing ourselves, because why would they do that? So a lot of the research that's been done in these areas isn't that expansive, because it's people funding it themselves. So this was a scientist called Remy Peelok, and I don't necessarily agree with what he did, but he had like a pen, let's say this is a pen, and he put day-old chicks in it, and if you Google it, you'll find it. I think it's P-E-O-C-H, Remy Peelok. It was in the 1980s. If you've got a pen like this, he put day-old chicks in it. And one end of the pen was separated, say like a third of it. So the chicks were in the top third of it. The bottom 2/3, which was separated, let's say by wire fencing, had an REM in it, which is a random event generator. So have any of you ever had or tried those, the automatic vacuum cleaners, like circular disc things, and they're supposed to like clean your house and they go randomly, which they don't pick stuff up. I've tried it, but so it's a little square box like that, which is a computer that would randomly, it was called an event generator because on the graph it would generate an event of where it's been. So if it was in this hall, it would randomly go over the whole hall. Doesn't matter what you did, that's how it was programmed. When the chicks were in this part and this random event generator was in this part, on the graph, it didn't, or where it went, it didn't go any further than 25% away from the chicks. Impossible, can't do that. So he did it time and time again, and it came back with the same answer. So what he concluded from that was for some reason, these day-old chicks were imprinting onto the computer, as it being money, onto this random event generator, and they couldn't go away from him. So they can't actually explain why they did it. Similar thing happened with 3-day-old rabbits rabbits are very sensitive to light, and it actually had a light on it. So they didn't want this thing near it. So it was at the other end of this, if like this pen or this